Hey everybody, it's Evan again, back with another episode of the weekly Reboot, and we are on part 2 of a series talking about Recovery Alive, a partner organization that Reboot's really excited to work with. We're going to continue to be prayerful about ways that God can align us. It's a movement. It's a group of people who are working with churches to try to say, hey, let's, through the stories of personal recovery, let's try to create really a church revolution. Let's try to get the local church. One of the things that we talked about yesterday in some of our private meetings was, what problem can the church not solve in the world? And one of those that that we're passionate about here at Reboot, and they are at Recovery Live, is the issues of mental health, trauma, and substance abuse. And so today we're going to be talking about a few more of those things as we kind of work through a couple of the 12-step things, but look at it through a larger perspective. And today we're going to specifically be sharing with you some information about how our relationships can be wounded by these experiences, but also why taking an inventory of those wounds is so vital for the healing process. You're not going to want to miss it. So here we go. So John, thank you so much for being here for another episode. We're going to get into it. Before we do that, I know it's going to be a little bit time consuming, but I want to read through the 12 steps because not everybody is as versed in them as others. So I'm going to read through them quickly. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless and that our lives had become unmanageable. We talked about that last week. 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, we admitted to God and to others and to another human that the harm that we have done to others and the harm that we've done to ourselves. 6, we humbly ask God to remove our defects of character. 7, we ask God for the grace to forgive those who hurt us. 8, we made amends to all the persons who had harmed us. Who had harmed, unless to do so would injure them or others. Number 9, we extended forgiveness to those who had harmed us, except when to do so would injure them or others. Number 10, we continued to take personal inventory of when we were wrong, promptly admitting it. Number 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and power to carry that out. And 12, having a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, that we carry this message to others and practice these principles in all of our affairs. And so those are the 12 sort of slightly revised, slightly edited 12 steps through the Recovery Alive thing. And today I actually want to talk maybe most about what you call the power of confession, which is not necessarily a step in the original language that's said the same way. So first off, what is that step? When we talk about the power of confession, what is that?
Yeah,
do you mean like go to the altar and say, Lord, forgive me? What is it?
Yeah, in some context, the original 12 steps written by Bill Wilson was very much for the alcoholic, the person who's the struggling addict. And in the big book, he speaks a lot about the fact that addicts are above all things selfish. And there's just a heavy work that Bill was trying to do to help addicts confront, because we talked about in that first episode, this denial that we've hurt anybody or that my addiction has hurt anybody. Right. So there's just a heavy work on that. And the reason I mention that is because we had to do a little bit of tweaking. If you've at all had any experience with the 12 steps, we had to rework some of these steps so that the 12 steps could be completely relevant to anybody who's struggling with anything. So step 5 specifically, we talk about this admission of going like, yes, somebody, not only did I hurt somebody, but somebody hurt me as well. And so we really hit both of those things at the same time, equally as important as what I did to other people is something I have to really confront and talk about and work through. And what did that do when I hurt them? How did that impact their life? That's what we talked about. That's what a true amends is about. But then also when somebody hurt me, I can say this is what they did, this is how it felt and all that stuff. But then how did it impact the rest of my life? And so that's why it's so important to get into this thing called what we call the power of confession is, well, and you guys talk about this again in the book, we tend to hide things that have been done to us or that we do to other people. Right. And it's very much to our detriment. And that's why James says, confess your sins one to another and pray for each other so you could be healed. There is healing in relationship this way. There's definitely healing in relationship with God, but
Right.
There's something that happens when I tell one other person.
That's it.
And I share that with one other person that I'm struggling. So confession sometimes feels like I'm telling you something so I can be absolved. But it's really, I'm telling you something because that is the mechanism God created for healing. There's power in vulnerability. C.S. Lewis quote about vulnerability: it's impossible to love without vulnerability.
Right.
There is no love without that kind of transparency and that vulnerability. Yeah. And that's how trust is built. I mean, I go on and on. So, but that's all components of confession.
Yeah. And I think it's like, know the truth about what happened, know the truth about yourself, and then finding a way to share that, finding a way to express that. And I think so often it's, the tendency is to do this one time.
Right.
Like we come, and I think that maybe even traditional church structure, sort of, that's the idea of like, okay, I went forward that one Sunday, I got right with the Lord, and that was my turning point.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, a lot of times I see a lot of empty altars. I see a lot of empty times of that. And I think one of the things that I'm challenging in my heart lately is to be like, okay, what are the things that I need to really practice in terms of confessing to the Lord? What are the things that I need to confess into other people? This is the way it impacted my life. And then one of the things I need to say, hey, you know, and here's some stuff that I've done as well. And you outline, there's really 4 key ways that relationships are greatly impacted by these offenses, by some of these wounds. And I found this really interesting. And so you outlined 4 key areas that really we don't touch on too much here at Reboot. Would you share what those 4 things are?
Yeah. And if you don't mind, I'm going to hit confession just
please
a tiny bit more. And
double back. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're dealing with confession, as far as you're concerned, I almost ask you this question. What do you think the biggest benefit that comes out of confession is for somebody who's experiencing trauma? What have you seen in the work? I hate to turn it back on you, but what have you seen as like the biggest benefit to somebody who's experiencing severe trauma to just begin to get this stuff off of their chest? What would you say is like?
They tell the truth. That's the thing. You start to tell the truth, because until you tell the truth, you can't talk about its impact before you talk about what actually occurred. And so I'd say that it for us is there's an acknowledgement of this happened. And then because of this reality that happened, I break the cycles of deny, cry, numb, and run. And now I can actually start dealing with the thing behind the thing that I've probably been spending time addressing.
Good. And for us, what we see in confession is it is the best way to repair relationships.
Gotcha.
This one and this one.
Okay.
It's unbelievable what happens when you start to be honest with somebody, because you've always thought, if I ever say this one thing to somebody, they will think I'm crazy. I'm stupid. In fact, in your book, you talk about like how everybody who begins to confess, your opening story, just powerful, about a veteran who was a medic and like didn't really talk about this stuff.
Right.
But what impacted me when you were talking about that is that this person believed that nobody else felt like they did. Right. And so all of a sudden it's just, you're like, oh my gosh, that wasn't so bad.
Right.
That wasn't as hard as I thought it would be.
Right.
And so just really quickly in step 10, we say, continue to take inventory. And when we're wrong, promptly admit it.
Yeah.
Promptly. If you're married, promptly.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like it takes what's the distance between when you've screwed up to when you finally apologize or finally admit you're wrong? Those things are indicative of our relationship with God and relationship with others, how quickly we can say,
that's it.
Oh, I screwed up. You know, the story of David, how long it took for Nathan to finally wake him out of it. How can a guy who's after God's own heart do these things, right?
Yeah.
And then just to be in that kind of, he was in denial if ever a person was. But if you're living in those relationships of confession, if like you said, like confession is a lifestyle, you're living in that lifestyle, then your blind spots will be called out. You'll have people in your life who can tell you the truth. It's just a life of truth telling. Yeah. And it's so powerful. So I just want to say that, like just how important confession is to just living a life of freedom.
Yep.
I don't have any secrets.
Is it less, are we better at telling the truth or worse at telling the truth? Like I'm formulating the question in that I feel like there's a place of breaking and there's a zone where it's like, okay, this was my truth telling zone where I was raw and somewhat a little bit unfiltered, and I didn't have my guards up. But then there's the other two sides of it, like the part where I'm super lost in the sauce, and then the part where I'm a little too holy and have it all together. And it seems like there is this truth telling zone, and it sounds like that's the zone we want to try to live in. This
the zone,
truth with ourselves, truth with others.
I love the zone because it's more of like not just I'm oversharing or
right.
Yeah. People are like, oh, I didn't need to know
the poor lady
all
at the
that
grocery
stuff.
store. You're like, how's your day? You're like, well,
see, there it is. That's exactly my point. It's not just what you're sharing, but who you're sharing it with.
Right.
Because don't you learn that who's a safe person and who's not a safe person? And the only way you can tell, and we're going to get into trust, commitment, communication, expectations. But I tell people who are struggling with trust. All right, so I get a husband and wife. I'm a clinical social worker. I'm seeing people in therapy. I do couples and individuals. So I get a couple in, and the wife has been cheated on by the husband, right? And she's got about it. Maybe she's a year in, and the husband is going like, I've done everything she asked me to do. What else do I need to do?
Right.
She still doesn't trust me. And she's going like, I'm still bleeding all over the place.
Yeah.
It's just so hard for me to do this. And to some extent, the answer I give them of how does somebody learn to trust again or begin to trust again? There are processes, but do you know really the only way to trust again is to trust again.
Right.
There's no other way to do it.
Right.
I got to take a leap of faith and go like, you're either going to get a divorce or you're going to lean back into your husband and trust. He may not deserve it.
Correct.
You're like, only by the grace of God, that's fine. But the mechanics, and this is how I'll introduce these 4 relationship factors. The mechanics of relationships is that there cannot be any kind of relationship without trust. And I mean any kind. I told you about the cookout. We love some cookout out here. Some people don't know what cookout. It's a restaurant. It's a fast food restaurant.
My man over here's favorite things. Snickers.
The greatest dessert you will ever have in life is a Snickers cookout shake. You'll thank me.
But I just want to say this episode is not brought to you by Cookout.
Brought to you by Cookout.
Unless Cookout would like this episode, in which case we're going to split 50 and 50.
I just free shakes for life.
Free
I'll take, give me that little card. I'll
You've
take
heard
it.
that expression like, I'll be there in 3 shakes? You ever heard that expression?
I have not.
People are like, oh, I'll be there in 3 shakes. This is like, I'll be there in free shakes.
I like that.
It's punny.
That's very punny.
Somebody out there, can you guys put in the comment or something?
Send
like,
emails.
That? Yes. Anyway.
All right. So you go to a cookout and there's somebody working at the window and they're like, hey, I want this Snickers shake, right? I'm about to ask them for this dessert that it will change your life.
A life-changing experience.
And I have an expectation.
Yeah.
I have to communicate. There's some commitment involved. But the first thing I do is I got to take my credit card, and I have to hand this thing to somebody I don't know. I've never met this person before.
We do it every day.
Yeah, they're like 16 years old. They, God knows how bad of a day they had. They might spit in my milkshake. No, hey, again, that might lose our sponsorship. They would never do it at a cookout.
Right.
So every relationship, my point is every relationship demands some level of trust. It doesn't exist. And so when our trust has been violated, how difficult is it for us to have relationships? I think every person watching has had their trust violated some point in time. Lose your innocence. When you're a little kid, it's like anybody. Your parents are saying don't talk to strangers because you will talk to strangers because why wouldn't you? You have no idea. The world shouldn't be this way. Of course it shouldn't, but somebody proves to you the world's a very screwed up place. Right. And so when we have our trust violated specifically, it breaks our relationship with others. Guess what it does? It also breaks our relationship with God. How many times, if somebody has trust issues, they don't just struggle with relationships with other people, they struggle with a relationship with God, especially when you're talking about father wounds.
Yep.
Somebody has had their trust violated by their father, and then you're like, hey, you have a heavenly father. You're like,
that's
no,
so
thank you.
Right.
So if you're not addressing in this inventory how
or they had bad theology that was like, if you believe in God, this will happen. It didn't happen. They're like, so God let me down.
Oh, good. So just theological breaking of trust is like, you just pray enough.
He's not a man of his word.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time. God didn't keep his word to me.
C.S. Lewis went through that. When his mother was passed away as a little kid, that's how he became an atheist ultimately, is because he says, when he prayed, he said, the thing didn't work.
Didn't work. Yep.
Yeah. And so you're in this position of going like, people let me down. God let me down. Guess what? Nobody can take as good a care of John Eklund as John Eklund can.
Right.
And now you isolate, you have kind of shallow relationships. So the first place to work on inventory is like, man, where has trust been violated? And being good at amends means I admit that I cheated on you. And when I did cheat on you, how did it impact your ability to trust other people?
Right.
Ooh, when you start to do that.
Right. What was the fruit? What was the end result of this broken trust?
That's real amends, because now godly sorrow produces true repentance.
Right.
I can get to a place where I say, oh, no wonder. That husband who's going like, why doesn't she just get over this thing?
Right.
It messed up not just our relationship, but every relationship your wife has
with other people.
Right. Everybody is not true. I've got a double down. Man, you seem like my wife has just gotten more controlling. She's bubble wrapping the kids. Well, it's because you violated her trust. Don't you see it? Now you're saying that she's out of control and you're gaslighting her. Why? Because you violated her trust. Take ownership of that and watch what happens.
Right. And I think that's amazing, because obviously the world has wounded us. You wouldn't be joining us for Weekly Reboot if you hadn't experienced the cruelty of the world firsthand at some point. And so that trust is always broken. Like whether it was not someone, it might have been somebody really close to you, but still your trust that you were safe in your own home, you were safe in your own community, that people would respond a certain way if you did these things. And if I put enough goodness out into the world, I'd receive goodness back. A lot of these things, I find that a lot of times it's not even necessarily like this one person is the point of my distrust, but it's just sort of this larger painted brush of people don't respond the way I want them to. Who needs people? I'll just sort of use people and buy things, use people and have a life, have a home, have a family, whatever. And I'll just kind of go through life that way. And I think that's one of the things I love what he said was, hey, this hurt me this way, or this hurt you this way, and the fruit of that has been this. And I think sometimes if you don't know that answer, so you can't necessarily dictate and say, and this is the way it's impacted you. Sometimes you could ask the question, I want to know, so what is the impact of my breaking of your trust been? What has the impact been in your life? Tell me, help me understand that. And asking that question, I think, can really be a powerful start to a conversation. So we're going to pause for just a second. I want you to think about who is somebody maybe you want to have that conversation, somebody you've disappointed, somebody maybe you've hurt that you kind of carry a little bit of guilt, maybe a little bit of shame around. And could you say to them, hey, I'm going to own my stuff. I messed up here. I'm going to acknowledge it. And I think it probably had this impact, but I want you to tell me, how did it impact you? And start that conversation. So just pause, reflect on who that might be, and then we're going to get into 3 other relationship components here in just a moment. All right, so we've talked about trust, that there is no relationship without trust. You can't have it. Even a transactional one, like handing my card to somebody, I am trusting a certain thing. And when that's damaged, I have to take inventory, which basically means take stock, create a list, create a documented version, an acknowledged version of that. And then I have to acknowledge those things. So then we talk about 3 other areas. You've said them quickly: commitment, communication, and expectation. Touch on all those.
Yeah.
Touch on
so
one
we
of
have
those.
we have these worksheets that you're working through with your inventory. Not only who hurt me, who did I hurt, but when I hurt that person is the next worksheet. It's worksheet number 2. How did it impact either, if somebody hurt me, my ability to trust, or someone else's who I hurt, their ability to trust? And then the second question will be, how did it impact their ability if I hurt them?
Right.
How did it impact their ability to make commitments? Because that's what comes out of trust, is like, now I can't commit to anything anymore. And commitments are kind of the next level of that relational growth, is that if I can't, obviously if I can't trust this person, if I'm like, I see this kid behind the window of the cookout and I'm like, didn't I just see him on like America's Most Wanted or something like that? Like my card is staying in my pocket. I'm going to keep driving. So I can't make that commitment.
But I'm going to get my shake first.
Yeah, well, I might get my shake. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to find it. There's a lot of cookouts in North Carolina, buddy. I'm telling you, Johnson County's got like 6 of them. So trust then gets to this. So how has this been difficult for me to commit to God and to commit to other people, to stay in relationship, to say I'm willing to hang on in this relationship? So like, when you're talking about a cookout, relationship, you have options. But when you're talking about, you start to get into these closer relationships, I'm willing to commit to a recovery group. I'm willing to commit in my marriage. I'm willing to commit in this friendship and really hold on. You see a lot of like flakiness, what we would call, and shallow relationships. And we say, man, that, I think we're down on those. But a lot of times people who are struggling in those places of kind of being non-committal, they're there because they're hurt.
Yes.
Or we're there because we're hurt and we can't commit because somebody violated a commitment in our life. They, in some way, they broke the contract of our relationship. And so acknowledging that, like, in what ways have you been hurt through like failure to commit, or in this area where you failed to commit, you didn't follow through. And of course you go, well, that sounds like trust, but that's the foundational piece. Commitment is the decisions we make out of trust.
Right.
And so we're just trying to face like, man, why is it difficult for me to say, hey, I'm sure this happens to you. It happens, I think, in all ministry and counseling, is that you'll have people who come for the first session or 2 or 3 or whatever. Why don't they stay in it? Because ultimately some part of them feels like, I can't stick in this because it's just not going to last. It starts to feel unsafe, And so we want to address wounds of commitment.
I think that's so, sorry, I just have to chime in. We do the 3-week challenge at Reboot that we say, come to the first 3 weeks. And if you don't like it, you can leave. But it is interesting. Years ago, I participated in a pretty elaborate training of sales training. This was from a previous career, multiple careers ago. And one of the things that the guy used to always say, Jim Holmes, if he ever listens to this, he'll know. Jim used to always say, there's only one reason people don't buy from you: trust. He said, because if I tell you this product is going to change your life and you decide to leave and not buy the product from me, it's because if I say this is going to save you money, if I say this is going to make your business run better, if I say if you come to Reboot Group and I say the process will work if you work the process, which is what you just said, this is going to transform your life. Your life's going to be better than it's ever been. It's going to be changed forever. And you say, nah, I'm good.
Right.
The number one reason is you didn't believe what I said.
100%.
You didn't really trust me.
100%.
And therefore the commitment, what I hear you saying is the commitment's really the action. It is the fruit of a root of distrust.
Well, and check this out. The ability to commit is ultimately about relationship.
Right. That's right.
I think in therapy, when we're seeing this with motivational interviewing, and motivational interviewing is just genius because it's the research around it is showing that therapy works for almost the only reason. And it's not the technique, it's not CBT or EMDR.
Right.
It's when somebody believes that therapist cares about me,
right,
that she will not violate my trust.
Right.
And there's a connection. That's how it works. And so having the ability to be, I think 3 weeks is very genius, because it's like I'm starting to feel like if they can make one meaningful connection with somebody and connect to God in that period of time, then commitment feels a lot safer, and that can start moving. And so that's the importance of addressing that in inventory, is like, I see not only do I struggle to trust, but I struggle to commit. Or not only did the person I hurt get a trust wound, but they also have a commitment wound.
And I just want to say there's a lot of instability among trauma overcomers, trauma survivors. There's a lot of instability. They're switching careers often. Yeah. They're moving constantly. They're moving from relationship to relationship constantly. And I find that one of the most common challenges for long-term healing is that instability. But a lot of times the root is commitment. They don't feel like other people make commitments to them, and then they don't commit to other people. They hop from church to church, from Bible study to Bible study, from recovery ministry to recovery ministry, thinking the next one's going to be the one that saves me. The next one's going to be and I think this wound of when we've been wounded through distrust and lack of commitment shown to us, or perceived lack of commitment, I think this creates a transactional relationship. And we even see this in the employment world when we're interviewing, when I meet with a lot of other CEOs, executives, it's amazing. You have this fractional workforce, this contractor-based workforce that's the fastest growing workforce in our country right now. And essentially what's that saying is, you can use my skills, but you can't have me.
Right.
I'm not going to commit to your
100%.
organization.
No golden watches anymore.
But it's just a transactional relationship. And this is spilling over into our churches, it's spilling into our personal relationships. And so if you find yourself constantly starting over, maybe ask yourself, do I have a phobia of commitment? Am I afraid of not just romantic relationships, but am I afraid of putting my 2 feet in and say, I have enough trust in myself and I have enough relationship with you that I'm willing to go all the way? And if that's not, I just want you to take a minute, and maybe now's a good time to take inventory of that and confess that and say, you know what? This person I made a commitment to, and I got scared and I backed out and I need to call him or, hey, Lord, I made a commitment to you. I was going to do this, and I haven't done that because I have a problem. Just take a moment, take inventory of that, because this is not about passive listening. That's not what the weekly reboot's about. It's about active application. So we're going to pause and give you just a moment, and then we're going to come back for a short little section covering the last 2 ways that relationships are impacted. All right, so we've covered 2: trust and commitment.
Yep.
Right. Power of confession. But now we're talking about communication and expectations.
Yeah.
Communication expectations.
Well, we could spend a whole episode just on communication, but it's really clear when you see somebody who's wounded that they communicate differently.
That's right.
In a lot of different ways. It could be anger.
Right.
Could be passive aggressive.
Sarcasm, all the
communication. Yeah. Gaslighting, or just how many relationships you got the person who chases the one around the house and the other one does what? Shuts down.
Yeah.
Gives a silent treatment. And so those are all results. Our communication is deeply impacted when we have been wounded, or when we have wounded other people. We can say the reason you communicate in this way, like you're walking on eggshells all the time.
Right.
Or that you're just, you have, feels like this person is just constantly angry. It's like, well, obviously people need to be held responsible for their own behavior, but how have I contributed to a wound that brings that out in them? And so what we talk about a lot of times is when somebody is walking wounded, very much it's like a sunburn. If you come back from the beach, you got, didn't put the necessary amount of whatever on, and you cover it up with a shirt, you go to work, somebody comes behind you, hey, brother, slaps you on the back. What do? You howl, scream. Yeah. Don't touch. What does it matter? And what you'll watch is the person who hits you will look at you and say, in some form or fashion, that is an exaggerated response,
right,
for what I just did to you. How many times do we see that in relationships? We're like, where did that come from?
Right.
What if we answered it? Maybe it came from a worth wound, something you did to hurt me. I'm carrying this wound around, but I'm denying it. You get smacked in the back, and it comes out sideways. And so our communication is deeply impacted. And so if you are sarcastic, if you use passive-aggressive comments to try to get what you want, if you shut down, if you have anger, you explode in anger, do that inventory and say, why do I communicate this way? How did that wound, how did what this person did to me impact the way that I communicate, or lack of communication with people? And again, we could take this apart forever. Somebody you hurt, and you see the way that they're bitter, they're resentful, like everything's poisonous coming out of them. Did you contribute to that a little bit? In some ways, is the way that you hurt somebody impacted their ability to communicate in a healthy way, to have healthy communication. Because again, communication takes trust and commitment, doesn't it? It takes this ability to be able to go like, I'm going to tell you something. Something's going to come out of my mouth that I have to believe that you're going to take care of. And so there's just so many ways that communication can be impacted by wounds and hurt.
So who's right, who's wrong in the backslapping sunburn colloquialism that you just used? I'm wondering, when somebody walks up behind them, and smacks them, who was it the person who covered it and then overreacted in the moment that was wrong? Was it the person who they shouldn't have slapped somebody in the back? They should have known better. And then afterwards, I can imagine that person says, I can't believe you slapped me in the back like that. And the person's like,
how would I know?
You need to chill out. Like, I didn't,
100%.
So I'm curious, who's right and who's wrong?
Yeah, great question. So there's a bunch of, again, we could take this apart for hours, but like if you ever are in couples counseling, you hear button pushing.
Yeah.
You ever hear that before? You know how to push my buttons. Does somebody know how to push your buttons?
Yes.
Yes. The struggle is once you know that person has sunburn, now you have a responsibility a bit, don't you? Like if I know you have sunburn, isn't it different after I know if I hit you in the back or if I didn't know in the first place? Because I've done that before. Somebody goes, I don't know what it is. And somebody's like, man, I had surgery on my shoulder. And like 2 hours later, I come behind them and grab their shoulder because I forgot or whatever,
Right.
you know, but now I'm responsible because they told me. So I have a higher responsibility. So if I know, and this is the beauty of working through this inventory, the struggle is that the person who's been wounded a lot of times doesn't even know they have sunburn.
Right.
So they're going like, I don't know why I'm reacting that way. I'm just angry all the time. And then people are hitting this button, and they don't know why. Why is it that every time this person says this to me, you know, when I first did my inventory, the work that I did with my sponsor was about being bullied when I was in middle school. And here I am, a decently successful 30-year-old guy but there are things that those bullies told me that I still believed. We call those worth wounds, wounds of worth, where I'm like, those folks convinced me that I did not have as much value.
Yeah.
And so, but when somebody touched an area of my life, I was told I was stupid, that the poverty that I was experiencing made me less worthy. And, you know, I know we're joking around about a little bit, but I was very overweight. And so, man, anybody called me fat or, you know, out of shape or whatever, really got me. And then we identified one word, and it's lazy.
Yeah.
When somebody called me lazy, I would lose my mind.
Right.
Those are worth wounds. You touch those things. Now, I'm responsible for my reactions, for sure. I am.
Yeah.
However, there's a reason why I have an exaggerated response. It's because I have stitches in my back, and somebody touches that.
Right.
You know, and so being able to identify that then allows me to further heal, allows me to get into a place where I can see, hey, here's why I'm responding that way, and to start really pinpointing how I can fully heal from that. Does that make sense?
It's an amazing answer. Absolutely amazing answer. And so I want to put a bow on this. We only have like 2 minutes. Touch on expectations.
Expectations go right along with communication, because once you can communicate in a healthy way, you get to a place where I have expectations in all my relationships.
Which is a good thing, right?
It's a wonderful thing.
We should want to have expectations of others at some point, because there's enough relationship and trust built, right?
Correct. And they need to be obviously realistic and all that kind of stuff. But one of the struggles that most relationships have is that they don't share what their expectations are. Right. I don't feel like I can ask for what I need. And so we say unexpressed expectations are premeditated resentments. If you don't express your expectation and still expect that from somebody, you are just inviting a resentment. You're saying, I'm going to be resentful because, and again, couples counseling, you hear this thing, you want me to be a mind reader. Well, we do sometimes. I want you to anticipate my needs. And so expectations, you know, get busted up, you know, in relationships, and part of the inventory is healing. That ability to voice those expectations, be realistic about those things, and ask for what you need.
Yeah. And so I start by saying, hey, this is the way I was wounded, because there's different parts of the inventory. One is I was hurt, and there's 4 you listed here. You know, let me just quickly turn to that. So who hurt me, right? This is the name of the person, relationship, what happened, and how it made me feel, the impact. Who I hurt, right? The name of the person, relationship, what happened, and then the feeling. And then, you know, you have how those actions have impacted my ability to trust, to commit, communicate, and to set expectations, and then vice versa, how my actions towards you might have done the same thing to impact your trust, commitment,
and those worksheets then lead to you being able to forgive, and to make amends. Because now I can say, how do I process out of my hurt? How do I process out of the fact that I hurt you? Now you're making amends, and you're working on forgiveness, and that becomes a lifestyle as well. Right.
And so we touch on this in the Reboot curriculum, right? I mean, we go through those forgiveness chapters, but we don't look at it with quite this lens. And so I hope this is a sort of a 2.0 or a 3.0 level course on what you have already gone through in the Reboot program. If you want to learn more about this, please go download the worksheets. They're really good for this series that we're doing. This is a little micro series between some other larger series, but we're going to see if we can get John and Recovery Alive to do some more of these with us, because I think there's so much good stuff that's so complimentary that's going to be such a blessing to you all. So I hope, whether you're kind of consuming this information by yourself or in a group, I hope you will go download those, and I hope you'll start saying, how can I practically apply some? Because freedom awaits on the other side and of this difficult work. It's the work, again, if you work the process will work, and I hope you'll do that. That's our heart and our prayer for you. Until next time, for the Weekly Reboot, I'm Evan. This is John. We will see you again soon.